Good morning. How are you this morning? Great, great, great. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Reverend Mary Shelton. I'm delighted to see you here at the Golden Gate Center for Spiritual Living. If you came in the door by accident and you thought you were somewhere else, you are exactly where you need to be, believe me. And don't let this story scare you off. But this is about being clear about what you want to experience, because what we're talking about this week is what it does, which is what the creative law does. And the creative law does not have a sense of humor, and it can't interpret, so it's kind of literal. A man walked into a restaurant with a full-grown ostrich behind him. The waitress asked them for their orders, and the man said, "I'll have a hamburger, fries, and a Coke." And she turned to the ostrich and asked him, "For you?" "I'll have the same," said the ostrich. Well, a short time later, the waitress returned with their order. "That'll be $9.40, please," she said, and the man reached into his pocket and pulled out exact change for the bill. The next day, the man and the ostrich came again. And again, the man ordered a hamburger, fries, and a Coke. And the ostrich said, "I'll have the same." And again, the man reached into his pocket and paid with exact change. And this became a routine until the two entered on a Friday night. "The usual?" asked the waitress. "No, this is Friday, so I'll have a steak, baked potato, and a salad," said the man. "Same," said the ostrich. Soon the waitress brought the order and told the man, "That'll be $19.62. And once again, the man pulled exact change out of his pocket and placed it on the table. And the waitress could not hold back her curiosity any longer. So she said, "Excuse me, sir, how do you manage to come up with the exact change every single time?" "Well," the man said, "several years ago I was cleaning the attic and I found an old lamp. And when I rubbed it, a genie appeared and offered me two wishes. And my first wish was that whenever I had to pay for anything, I just put my hand in my pocket and the exact amount of money would be there." And the waitress said, "That's brilliant. Most people would ask for $1 million or something, but you'll be rich for as long as you live." "That's right. Whether it's a gallon of milk or a Rolls Royce, the exact money is always there," said the man. After a slight pause, the waitress said, "What's with the ostrich?" The man sighed and paused and then answered sheepishly, "My second wish was for a tall chick with long legs who'd agree with everything I say." Not exactly what he had in mind. But the creative law does not read our minds. That's why we say when we do treatment, we want to be specific. We want to be clear. And we want to know what we want to experience and how we want to feel about it, as well as the general idea of what it is. So as we're cultivating 2020 spiritual vision now, we're remembering and reviewing the idea that we always have to refocus our attention from whatever the distressing appearance might be, if we're having one, to the spiritual truth that's behind it. And you know, it might not be a bad idea to do that with great things that are happening in our lives too, because we can take those just as literally and give ourselves, a lot of credit for the good stuff while we pawn off the bad stuff on other people. But the truth really is that even with the good stuff, you like that, huh? Even with the good stuff, it is good to look behind it to the spiritual truth. It's useful for us to see what atmosphere am I dwelling in that's bringing this experience forward, and can I adjust it? Can I adjust it upward? So the January series is all about the basic principles of the science of mind. So we want to start at the very beginning, just like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. Start at the very beginning and go forward. But for a moment, I'm going to go backward and do a little review. So the first Sunday of this month, we talked about the chapter in Ernest Holmes' book, The Science of Mind. At the very beginning of the book, it's called The Thing Itself. And that's about God, the mystery, the infinite spirit, the nameless one, that presence and power, and the recognition that that is really all there is. Everything that exists, if this thing exists, whatever it is, and if it really is omnipotent and omnipresent and omniscient, then it's got to be everything. Because otherwise it's not omnipresent, because it's God and. So God, in our view, in our teaching, God is all there is. And then secondly, last week we talked about the way it works. This is how creation comes into being in the way that Ernest Holmes described it, the way that Thomas Troward, one of his influencers, described it, is that spirit, in moving into form, the only raw material it can use to create form is itself. So creation is an inner movement of God upon itself. And the only thing Troward could think of that moved, that wasn't physical, was thought. And so Ernest Holmes took that idea from Thomas Troward, the idea that it is the very self-contemplation of God, or the thought of God, that is brought forth as everything that exists. I like to think that we are the love of God slowed down enough to become visible. We are holograms of the infinite. You know, one of the things I didn't say when I was talking about our presence as the infinite and using a hologram as an example, you know, I said when you cut up the holographic film, when you shine a laser light through it, any little piece of the hologram will show the whole three-dimensional image out here. The image is encoded in every tiny little bit of that holographic film. But what I didn't say was, as you cut up that holographic film into smaller pieces and you shine the laser light through it, the three-dimensional image that shows up is fuzzy, but it's still the three-dimensional image. So I think we're fuzzy holograms of God. You know, we're a little fuzzy around the edges, but we're still that presence in expression. And the creative law within God is what brings forth all of creation, us and everything else. And so today we're talking about what it does. So the thing itself, the way it works, what it does. And the way that the creative law works, what it does is it operates on belief systems in order to create. That's what it uses as its blueprint. So when it does that, we find that the more conscious we are of the fact that that creative law is using us and we're using it, the better the results will be in terms of what we're wanting to see and experience. Holmes said in This Thing Called You, if you learn to think of life as flowing through your every action, you'll soon discover that the things you give your attention to are quickened with new energy, for you are breathing the very essence of being into them. Attention, and these are my words, not his, attention is fertilizer. He also says in The Science of Mind, you exist that this power may have a unique outlet for its expression. The more life you express, the more of it flows through you. Therefore, every legitimate desire you have is the pushing of this power through you into its own self-expression. And when Holmes says every legitimate desire that you have, what he means is if what you desire is truly good for you and harms no one, then there is no reason that that desire cannot be manifested, come forward for you. There's no moral reason that God would not support that fully because it is the greater expression of itself. So our beliefs, and I'll say a little more about beliefs in a second, become the blueprint that the creative law is always using. And it doesn't matter if we know we've delivered blueprints or not. It doesn't matter if we know we're designing blueprints or not. The creative law will act upon it because it does that automatically. It just keeps cranking it out. Last week I said it's like your toaster. As long as it's always plugged in and the power's on, the toaster will toast anything you put into it. Doesn't matter how fancy or how simple it is, it won't do anything but toast. It doesn't know it's a toaster. It doesn't know it's toasting. It just toasts. And it will toast whatever you put into it. So if you want toasted misery, you can have that. If you want toasted joy, you can have that. Whatever you put in, it doesn't care. It will produce anything. So what sets the beliefs in our subconscious, which is where all this stuff lives, you know, below the conscious level, what sets those beliefs in place is our influences, our influencers. Parents, friends, teachers, clergy, movies, music, books, media, games, conversations, arguments, these give us information. And from those, we are also influenced, as well as that we influence some things as well. So our influences cause us to make decisions about what we believe is true. And we sometimes, because we're meaning makers, we make patterns. We interpret things in patterns, which may be accurate or not. But once we've kind of got that down, it actually creates a pattern in the brain of responses to certain kinds of triggers. That saves us time, it saves us memory, but it's not always true what we believe. So that can get us into trouble, because what we're doing is collecting evidence. And I put it in quotation marks because evidence is only as good as our interpretation of what we're looking at. So you ever watch those procedural crime shows or cop shows where the first three people they're sure did it are never the ones, you know? Because they make assumptions and then they discover more information. And so when they get more information, they find out that maybe their initial assumption about the evidence wasn't true. And finally, what sets the belief is that repetition of feeling and thought. So if we remember an experience that gave us great joy and delight, where we felt really loved and wonderful things were happening, and it was so good we could hardly believe it. If we think about that over and over again, and we re-experience that exhilaration and enthusiasm, that sets a certain tone or a certain pattern or expectancy that actually becomes physically mapped in the brain, because our neurons that fire along that pathway do it over and over and over again, and it actually creates like a highway in the brain. So we get the trigger and we go right into the experience. Unfortunately, what we do as human beings is we have a tendency to do that more with the stuff that made us unhappy than we do with the stuff that we loved. For some reason, those memories are stickier. And we just keep getting stuck to them. Have you ever seen the Charlie Chaplin bit with the flypaper? Where every single thing he does to get rid of the flypaper, in the moment, he's sure it's gone. He's sure it's gone. And then it turns up somewhere else. And every time it turns up somewhere else, he's baffled and surprised and disappointed. And he tries harder to get rid of it. And then it shows up somewhere else. And the faster it goes and the more confused he gets, the funnier it is. In real life, that's not so funny. Because that flypaper, that sticky negativity, as long as we go back and repeat it again and again and again, we recreate the experience of it inside ourselves, even when it isn't happening, just because of the potency of the memory. Are you getting this? Yeah. Oh, wow, that was a great response. Everybody knows what that's like, yeah? And so what we want to do is move to a place where our beliefs allow us to recognize that we have this potential within ourselves that is amazing. And so I want to share with you some unusual examples of the kind of things that the brain does that might put into question the power of our DNA or our heredity. And also some abilities that some people have that other people don't, that should, I think, rather than just looking like an exception, plant an idea in our minds that we have a possibly as yet undiscovered genius. We have a capacity or an ability or a potential that hasn't shown up in our experience yet, only because we doubted the possibility. So this image comes from a television program that was a few years back called The United States of Tara, in which this actress, whose name just went right out of my head, Toni Collette, that's it, Toni Collette, plays a woman with multiple personality disorder. And multiple personality disorder is something that is unique, of course, and rare, but also it means that people have been able to study this phenomenon, and I want to share with you what some of it looks like. Peter, in his late 30s, is a smooth talker who seduces women for their money. His motto is, pleasure is where it's at. Paul, his twin, is kind and decent and prides himself on caring for people in need. David, in his early 20s, is a highly talented sculptor. Tom, a teenager, is so mechanically adept that he can pick a 5-tumbler lock with a paperclip. Dorothy, a frightened 10-year-old girl, is prone to run away from home. All these people, in fact, exist only as aspects of John, an air traffic controller who broke down on the job, babbling to pilots in baby talk, and who was diagnosed during therapy as having a multiple personality. Dr. Putnam, who is an expert on this, says multiples exhibit some remarkable medical phenomenon. He gives, phenomena. I knew I said that wrong. He gives the example of one patient who reacted normally to a sedative drug in one personality, but was totally unaffected by it in another. Some multiples carry several different sets of eyeglasses because their vision changes with each personality, says Bennett Braun, who directs a unit devoted to treating multiple personalities at Rush Presbyterian, St. Luke's Medical Center in Chicago. Dr. Braun reports the case of a young woman who in one personality was colorblind for blue and green, a problem that ended with the successful treatment of her multiple personality condition. Another woman, admitted to a hospital for diabetes, baffled her physicians by showing no symptoms of the disorder at times when one personality, who was not diabetic, was dominant. A young man who was allergic to citrus fruits in some personalities was not in others. And that story, as I understand it, went on to say that if the one personality ate the citrus fruit and his personalities changed while it was still in his system, he would immediately break out in a rash. Research on brain patterns of multiples has produced data of unusual promise. Dr. Braun reports the case of a woman who at one point in her treatment manifested 4 personalities. Brainwave measurements showed that each had a distinct pattern of brain function. After her successful treatment, when these 4 personalities were blended into a single integrated one, the remaining pattern was still distinct from any one of the previous 4. So what that tells me is that there is more going on in us than just our genes, our genetic pattern. There is something about who we think we are that activates certain genes and deactivates others, and it can happen just like that. So we who are relatively stable as personalities and believing who we are, I know maybe I shouldn't speak for everyone, but you know what, generally speaking, we tend to have a consistent set of symptoms. And the more evidence we've gathered about our own particular spacesuit here and how it operates, the more that belief gets cemented that that is how it is. Interesting, though, if that's true, what is it in these people that is so different that they can flip theirs on and off in a second as the brain decides it's somebody else? Interesting question. Here are some other interesting and unusual examples. And these are people who can do unusual things. So about 20% of people can wiggle their ears, can move their ears. 22% can wiggle one ear, and 18% can wiggle both ears. Apparently, that is a throwback ability in the muscles to a common ancestor we have with cats that could move their ears around. 12% of women see 99 million more colors than everybody else. They have an extra cone, I think it is, in their eyes that allows them to perceive finer and finer distinctions of color. but it's only 12% of the population, and likely they don't realize that other people don't see the same things they see. Some people can recall in detail every moment of their lives. And the gal who was on Taxi, I can't remember her name at the moment. Anyway, she has this ability. And she said, if anybody mentions a year or a date or something to her, it's like there's a little film strip going in her head that goes backwards and lands her at that exact place, and she can describe where she was, what she was doing, what she was wearing, who was around. It's just the way her mind works. She can actually recall every moment of her life in detail. There are only, I think, 25 people in the world who've been identified who can do that. Some people have an experience in which their senses are overlapped, so that they can hear color, or taste music, or smell numbers, or some other blend of the five senses. It's unusual, but some people have that ability. Some people can actually hear their eyeballs rubbing against the muscles in their eye sockets when they move their eyes. That, I think, would be disturbing. And most people, in the United States anyway, do not have perfect pitch. About 14% of people have perfect pitch, where they can identify a note when they hear it. They know if it's a C sharp, if it's a B flat, if it's an A minor key or chord. They can identify that by hearing it. However, Chinese people who speak Mandarin, of that group, 60% of them have perfect pitch. Maybe having something to do with the importance of tone in the language when they're tiny babies. So the structure of the situation, the environment, the experience, brings forth some of these qualities in people. Others have these qualities and we don't necessarily know why, although it could be environment, it could be genetics, it could be a combination, it could be an idea, who knows? But what I'm inviting us to consider is that we have innately more possibilities than we've given ourselves. And so Ernest Holmes would suggest that what we want to be able to do is to plant in our consciousness more of what we want or imagine or would like to develop or move toward. Now, it doesn't mean that we wouldn't have to put some effort into changing our minds and opening into that level of creativity, whatever it is. But the very first step of it has to be that we're willing to open our minds to the possibility that we are more than we thought we were, that we have greater potential and possibility than we have imagined up until now, and that we invite the discovery of that. And that's different than wishing or hoping or casting our coin into the well, praying that the result will be what we want it to be. Instead, it doesn't have that desperate, I hope quality to it. Instead, it's an invitation to look for evidence that we haven't perceived before that tells us that there are greater possibilities for us, that we're more, to be attuned to looking for that. And when we do that, we're planting a seed in the soil of consciousness. So you know how it is when you can't remember somebody's name, like I couldn't twice in this talk already. But even Mary Lou Henner, that's the gal with the perfect memory. See, what happened was my subconscious mind was searching for that name the whole time I was going on and doing something else. Now, if I'd stood there and kept trying to remember it, I'd still be standing here. But when I let the subconscious mind take it, it will look for that until it finds it. Sometimes it'll be the next day. So when we begin to look for evidence that we have greater possibilities and greater potential and greater something that wants to come forward in us in our lives, when we're looking for that, then we begin to see it because the subconscious goes on a search for it. And it will bring you the evidence you're looking for when you're looking for it. I mean, not necessarily while you're in the act of looking for it, but as long as you're persisting at looking for it, what will sprout from that soil of the subconscious will be related to what it was you were seeking. You got me here, right? I mean, everybody's experienced this, haven't you? Has anybody ever remembered something that you thought you'd forgotten? Yeah, right. So we know that's active in us all the time. The question is, what job are we giving the subconscious mind? What are we asking it to go look for? What are we asking it to provide us with evidence for? Because it will produce evidence for us, even if we're wrong. So if we think we're awkward and no one likes us, then every time we drop a fork or trip over something, we will reinforce in our minds, I'm awkward, I'm stupid, nobody likes me. Anytime somebody seems to snub us, it won't even occur to us that they're preoccupied with something else. We'll immediately think it's because they don't like us or they're mad at us. Does this make sense? Yeah. So now the question is, what seeds are we going to use? What are we looking for? What would we like to plant? Because the truth is that beliefs can change. Yes, they can. So they can change when we're willing to question and consider other possibilities. Sometimes they can be changed very quickly if we have an unexpected, and usually these are, spiritual experience that is so profound and so profoundly affecting that we change our mind about who we are, about the world and the way it works, whatever it might be. Beliefs can change when we get more information. We can have an opinion that we've stated, that we're clear about, and somebody might change our mind by producing more information for us that allows us to see more of the picture. Or we can, as I'm inviting us to do in this instance, just make a choice. Yes? Oh, look at that. Well, good Lord, I went way ahead. Well, that's interesting. This was supposed to have... Oh, I know why, because I was pushing the button and I didn't need to. These come up on their own on this one. Sometimes I get so enthusiastic. So, yes, beliefs do change when we are planting those seeds consciously. Now, our beliefs can change too because of negative experiences, but I want to focus on what we want and going forward and producing a greater amount of happiness. So choosing those will take us forward into that. Ernest Holmes says, learn to exchange fears, doubts, and uncertainties for faith. There is a power which flows out through your words of faith. There is a law of faith which has the power to bring into your life everything you need. And faith is that place of deep felt knowing, of the expectancy of good. Maxwell Maltz said, if you were engineered for success and happiness, then the old picture of yourself as unworthy of happiness, of a person who was meant to fail, must be an error. We all know Charlie Brown is a good guy. And he's in the hole and he's still digging, And it's all about his self-esteem. But we know he's a good guy. And Maxwell Maltz, who was the author of Psychocybernetics, he was a plastic surgeon. He says, if you were engineered for success and happiness, then the old picture of yourself as unworthy of a person who was meant to fail must be an error. Hafiz says in the book, The Gift, where is the door to God? In the sound of a barking dog, in the ring of a hammer, in a drop of rain, in the face of everyone I see. My gosh, isn't it amazing that we miss God all the time when God is right in front of our faces at every moment? Why is it that we miss it? Because we think what we're seeing is what it is. Albert Einstein said, the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all art and science. It's the curiosity, the mystery, the wanting more, wanting to know more, to feel more, to experience more. You know, I asked you a week or two ago how many of you had been to hell, because I said this is a state of consciousness and so is heaven. You can visit them both. Don't make a condo in hell. It's not a permanent resting place. So we can unconsciously build a condo in hell when we're repeating all the little hurts and slights and everything that we've had. And what we want to do, if we're going to build a condo anywhere, is build it in heaven, where we live in love and appreciation and gratitude and celebration and joy. Yeah? In the book of Psalms, it says, I have said you are gods. All of you are children of the Most High. And so, when the Pharisees were giving Jesus a hard time, in the book of John it says, he quoted that. Jesus said to them, is it not so written in your law? I said you are gods. Meaning, why not heal the sick? Why not transform a life? Why not uplift a soul? Who's to say that only God has permission to do that when God is all there is? And then we become the vehicle for that healing, for that light, just by being willing to remember on occasion to be it, to let it through. And finally, Holmes said, what we need in addition to the knowledge that a power flows through us and operates upon our thought with mathematical precision is to realize that the greatest use of this power comes from more completely surrendering ourselves to its love. And so what I want to leave you with today is that to surrender to the love is all we really need to do. When we constantly come back to surrendering to the love, more and more love begins to reflect back to us. More and more love begins to be in our inner experience. And the outer conditions don't necessarily move us up and down because we live in that place. Now that's the place to build a condo. Namaste.